Awesome.
Right.
So, welcome everybody. Happy Wednesday afternoon. I think that's what day it is. My name is Taysa Lynch. I work for Prevention Works Vermont. We are a grantee of the vaping grant from DSU. So we regularly conduct vaping networking group, which is where we're at right now. This is a place for us all to share out resources, information, share projects that we have, ask questions, collaborate, network, any of those. So if that's something that would be interesting to you, all things vaping, this is the time, space, and location to do that. You're welcome to come more than just today. But at the last meeting, there was some talk about Zyn, and the following week, we had a steering committee meeting, and Tom Fontana, our steering committee member, and to my right, was sharing some information that he's found recently, and I begged him pretty much to come and share with this group. So he so kindly agreed to do that, and I am going to hand it over to Tom.
Taysa, thanks so much for the invitation. Thanks y'all for the chance to be here. Yeah, it's a great opportunity. I'm a mental health counselor and drug and alcohol counselor at the University of Vermont. I meet with students one-on-one through the conduct process, and then I do a lot of groups and proactive work I work with all of Greek life and then sports teams and all these different groups. So it's a wonderful chance to talk to a lot of students and hear about things. Prior to this, I was working at Virginia's middle and high school as a school-based clinician. And so just, that's important work being in our middles and high schools. And now it's cool kind of be working with the college group. And, y'all know how it is. The greatest thing we've done in public health was our march and great progress against tobacco use. And rates had been falling of use through the 80s, 90s, all these years until right somewhere 2012, 2015, and the Juul comes out and the vaping market comes on the rise. And just as we're starting to make good progress against that, still too many people using it, of course. But I'll tell you, I hear at the college age, college students are like, I do not want to be doing this shit. Like, it is not cool. This is fucking middle schoolish. I want to get off of this, even though it's hard. But it's not cool to anybody in college, which is great. So we're making progress on vaping. And just as we do that, just within the last couple of years, the Zyns in these pouches start coming up just as that's going down. I was at a training a bunch of years ago with a police officer. It was a drug recognition training. I don't know if they still do that. And he was saying, he's like, you got to go into the stores and look at the products they sell. This was particularly around weed. But I really took that to heart. And so I'm like, I always try to pop in dispensaries and places and look in the gas stations where most of our alcohol and nicotine comes from. And I noticed a few years ago in gas stations, the tobacco pouches showing up. There's always tobacco behind the counter, right? If you picture it, there's lottery and tobacco behind the counter. But the Zyn, these little pouches started coming but really in the last year or two, the pouches have shot up. And Zyn being the name brand of a pouch, which is kind of somewhat synonymous with nicotine pouches being the category. The breakthrough was it's a Swedish product. The snus was to make the nicotine salts in a spitless form, right? There's always been, right? If you think of old Western people putting tobacco in and spitting tobacco in a saloon, like there's always been mouth products, but these are the spitless version, and they've really gotten a footing in America in the last year or two. All over the world, in fact. I saw a report from the Premier League, the highest levels of European soccer, and 20% of the players reported. This is them reporting that they use these products. So it's really made a foothold with athletes and others. And let's get into some discussion about it afterwards and what you're seeing. But as I was talking to a student just a couple months ago, he was telling me about what you see in the stores, these Zyn pouches and packs. They come in 3s and 6s in milligrams. That's the strength of each pouch. There's little clear pouches. If you've never seen them, just goes right in. They're sometimes called upper deckies or pillows by the students because of their nice little soft look to them. They look cleaner, feel cleaner. There's no scent to this at all. So it's got this like, it's making room inroads with our athletes because of some of this. But they sell them in 3s and 6s, the strengths in the store. And he was telling me, oh, people that he found, you could just buy them online. And when you buy them online, you're avoiding all the taxes. It's a lot cheaper. You buy them in these bulk packages, and instead of 3s and 6s, you can get them in 9, 12s, 15s, 20s, 25s, 50s, 75s, and a remarkable 100 milligrams of nicotine in these things. So I was like, unbelievable. So I started doing the research to see how easy this is, and it was so easy. And it is something some of our students report doing. I think mostly students still just walk down to the store and buy it. But when you get into it for money savings or different things, the online thing, people know about it. When I ask students, I'm like, oh, do you buy them online? They're like, no, but my buddy down the hall, so it's a thing. But anyway, I wanted to just show you the ease of the online thing. So I just made a little presentation about that, and Tace asked me to come through and do that. And then let's get into a discussion if that sounds all right with people. So I'll share my screen, and what I was trying to do here was go through and show you what I saw in an online purchase. And I wasn't even trying to find the most outrageous like thing online. There's packs of 100s and other things strength wise, but I was just trying to show you just a real average site that I found. And my premise is that it's far too easy to buy a lot of nicotine for not much money, and that it's a 3-part problem: the ease, the amount of the nicotine, and how cheap it is when people buy this online. So we'll just look for a few minutes at a few steps of it. Right, so there's so many places you can buy this stuff online, and they got this little, basically to no security. So here's just one example, again, not even nearly the worst. I went to this marketplace online. I just typing it in, nicotine pouches, and they had a mint mixer bundle. It's a 15 milligram, again, not even the worst. There's 9s, 12s, 15s, 20s, all these types. This is a 15 milligram bundle, 5 of the wintergreen and 5 of the mint, so 10 packs for this price here, $40, and you could just add it in the cart. So here's the site down here, if you best value nicotine products at freepouch.com. And so it did make me say that I was over 21 to enter the site. It said you have to be over 21. I went to the oldest age I could be, and I told them I was 104. They said, great. So I just put down my birth date was 1/1/1920. And they're like, and I hit agree. And they were like, okay, sounds good to me. So then later on, when I went to buy it, so then I could browse the site, and I went to purchase something, I had to verify my age. This was an age verifier, agechecker.net. And so in this case, I said, oh, let me just tell them I'm my dad. So I was on this website. I'd already told them I'm 104 to enter the website. Now to go to buy it, I give them my dad's information, Richard Fontana in New York. And I told him 12/10/44. I gave them my father's information, and they said, great, that you're verified. So it worked, despite the fact that it was a different age than I first gave them. I was on a computer in Vermont.
I am. Thank you.
And my father lives in New York, and my father also died last year. So it didn't matter any of that information. The site just said, great, you're verified. And then once I was verified, I could then place an order and give them an entirely new name, an entirely new address to ship it to. So I could give them 3 different names, 3 different ages, and it was all fine. And then they were just happy to ship it to me. So it turns out that even with security, I didn't need to be 21. You just need to know the name and address of somebody who is 21, even if they're not alive. You just need to know that, enter it once, and then you can enter your information. So there was a checker, but it was quite simple to get around it. So that's the ease part. Beyond it, it's the amount of nicotine that's staggering to consider. If we want to do some kind of thought on how much it is, a cigarette has between like 6 and 12 milligrams of nicotine, but because you're lighting them on fire and burning off most of the nicotine, the absorbed rate is about 1.5 milligrams per cigarette. So a 20 cigarette pack, right? There's 20 cigarettes in a classic pack. The absorbed amount of nicotine, you get about 30 milligrams of nicotine from a whole pack of cigarettes. The nicotine pouches are commonly sold in single pouches of 3 and 6s. But it's not hard to find them at 9, 10s, and 15s and beyond. This is a pack of Siberias where each one of these is 100. So I'm going back to this pack. This brand was selling 15 milligram pouches with 20 pouches per tin and 10 tins total in their thing. So by way of a little bit of math, it's 15 milligrams per pouch times 20 pouches per tin times 10 tins. It's 3,000 milligrams of nicotine. And that's equal to the absorbed rate of about 100 packs of cigarettes, right? So the amount that they're selling equal to what you would get in about 100 pack of cigarettes. So the rate is just staggering. And then there's the price. If you were to buy 100 packs of cigarettes in Vermont, it would cost you over, around $1,000. We have that tax program to have it be so. But in this case, the company was selling all of that nicotine for under 40 bucks. So you could go online, buy $1,000 worth of nicotine for 40 bucks, have it shipped to your house as long as you know somebody dead or alive who's over 21. And that was as simple as the process was. So that's just the premise. That's far too easy to buy too much nicotine for not much money. So that's just the online piece. And I just quickly share a little bit about what I hear students themselves saying about these products. They're blowing up in use. It's not all students and it's not all people, but it's kind of this nebulous, like everyone's doing one of these things to stop the other ones, right? Like people start vaping and then ironically, like maybe I'll start trying to use cigarettes to get off of vaping because it's can't use cigarettes all the time, but you can vape all the time. Or someone's like, oh, maybe I'll use the Zins to quit the vaping. But mostly people just end up doing all of them. And it just adds more options to people, which makes it challenging for them. The Zins in particular have, I don't mean to overly gender it, but they've really made inroads with the bros, the gym bros. There is this wild triangle of dudes who go to the gym, hit Chipotle afterwards for their protein bowl, and then go to the gas station to buy Tweez and Zins, Twisted Teas and Zins. And like, it's this formula. And every time I say that formula to students, they're like, oh my God, bro, I know that, bro. Like they're laughing about because there's this whole, I don't know what this idea is, but it's really made its way of like the protein, the pre-workout for people going to the gym, and then that the Zins have their place for hockey players and athletes and people hitting the gym. On the swim team, our women's swim team was telling us, friends of theirs were at the Olympics and they saw these pouches on the pool deck. They're all over the place, but it's with athletes, it's not impacting the lungs. And it does help people feel locked in is the idea. But of course, as we know, the idea is if it helps you feel locked in, you're going to have a hard time feeling locked in without it. And it just really spreads. And then the tolerance keeps pushing it up. So just to introduce a few ideas that it's kind of spreading, particularly amongst these guys, and there's ways to think about that and talk about it. But let me leave it at that and just see what are y'all seeing? What are y'all thinking about? Please, anybody kind of jump in. I think, are we good to everyone share? Yeah, please, anybody, what are you thinking about?
Hey, Tom. First of all, thanks so much for doing this. When I heard you, you did such a great mini presentation at our steering committee meeting that I'm so glad that Tasha brought you on. So thanks for getting this out there. Can you tell me what you think or what you understand locked in means?
Right. So it's a good, because locked in is the phrase, and that's going to be, it's what we would say is the stimulant property of the nicotine, right? Nicotine, caffeine, prescription stimulants misused, and then cocaine itself are our main category of stimulants. Whereas cocaine is giving people probably the feeling they are pursuing from that is this euphoric confidence that it can bring. That's its own kind of outlier. But in these others, it's that feeling of I'm better focusing. And there is probably some true, another thing that comes up, students will reference like Huberman Labs. It's a massive podcast that's out there. And he is he's a neuroscientist, in his mind, providing pretty neutral information. And, he makes it that nicotine is a stimulant like caffeine. And if the most dangerous thing generally about nicotine is its delivery mechanism, right? Smoking it is horrible. Vaping it has many dangers. These pouches have fewer dangers in that sense. Nonetheless, it does not diminish the fact that there's lots of other things going on with nicotine. But he's saying like, oh, it's a stimulant. And so students hear that and they're like, hey, it's just like, as long as I take it safely, and these look safe because they're clear and don't smell, you're not spitting, they feel like it's helping them lock in. And but the subtle piece of that beyond focus is more probably motivation. That nicotine does a great job, any stimulant, right? It ties your brain to what you were doing when you did it, which is why we all need caffeine at the same time every morning. And it because once if you get in your car and smoke that's when you're going to want it, or when you go to the gym or go to class, it ties itself into this, which becomes a motivating factor. If people are like, oh, I do this right before as I go to the gym, it motivates them to go to the gym. So there's a way to use it in that motivating way. That's just a very tricky knife's edge to stand on, because you're gonna have no motivation with that. With caffeine, right? It does give a boost initially, but now it's just like you need it to just feel regular, and the absence of it's quite noticeable. That's the basic premise of any drug when the balance is shifted from more positives to more negatives, when the absence is more noticeable than the presence. And that quickly happens with nicotine. Other folks? How's that, Ralph? Hey, man.
Hey there. So I just had a couple comments. One, I threw in the chat a link to an article by Stephen Jort, who has been doing a lot of the research on the 6-methyl nicotine pouches. 6-methyl nicotine pouches have hit the market in the US as well. And they can say that they're nicotine free, and they will continue to do so until they lose a lawsuit, which is probably, who knows, maybe 3 years away based on past history with the FDA. So these will be marketed probably, who knows, but could be another 3 years as nicotine free. But estimates is that they'll be 3 to 10 times as addictive and potent than regular nicotine. And they have between 8 and 25 milligrams. So on the upper end, a lot of product. Plus, as I say, estimates are between 3 to 10 times. Those are just estimates, of course. But other drugs that go through methylation, when you add a methyl group, they tend to be, in mammals, it tends to make the product much, much more potent. So that's just for people to know. They name the 2 brands that are currently for sale. Everybody's going to get in on the act. It's so there'll be probably a lot more brands than just the first 2. So that's one thing to be aware of. 2, the whole idea that nicotine could be just like a bad, caffeine with a bad rap is a heavily marketed industry talking point that they released in a very organized manner. And they hire influencers. I can't speak to this particular guy you mentioned. I'd be willing to lose money on a bet that he's receiving money to say this stuff, but I don't know that. That may not be true. But there are so many influencers, podcasters out there who are paid by the industry to say this talking point line. Oh no, it's beneficial. It's a nootropic. Some of them acknowledge getting money, some of them don't. But either way, what they're missing, of course, is, as you said, what do you do when you don't have it? Well, it's one of the reasons it helps you focus is that if you don't have it in your blood, you can't focus, like once you get addicted. So there's that going on as well. And the level of addiction is such a different beast than caffeine, but that's their talking point. And then the last thing I wanted to share is that some of the latest studies are showing that in reality, so the Utah Health Department has released, the Department of Health in Vermont is sharing these precancerous growths that are forming in people's mouths of people who vape. And there's a lot of carcinogens in vape products. And the talking point again, and the thought has been that the nicotine might not be the most potent or thing to worry about, though it is actually contributes significantly to heart disease on its own. But then on top of that, they've now found that cells, when exposed to high doses of nicotine, can make nitrosamines, and that produces cancer. So they're now finding that high doses of of nicotine may actually wasn't what anybody thought previously, because nitrosamines are found in cigarettes, not in pure nicotine. But if animal cell lines actually can convert it into nitrosamines, which is known to be a class 1 carcinogen. So we don't know, basically, but it's not looking good. High doses of nicotine at any rate are not good for you. That it's just known they are harmful to you, certainly to your heart, if nothing else. Besides, actually, the addiction level itself is such that people, I mean, if some people experience real mental distress when they can't get nicotine back into their system from withdrawal, and they cannot even function. It's hard for them to, so it's really so much not just caffeine with a bad name. It's just really crazy successful spin that they throw out there. But at any rate, I just
Really
thought I'd share
relevant
those points.
man. Thank you for throwing that article in too. It'll be important to look at. It's like the backdoor around THC, looking at the Delta 8 is calling this a non-nicotine thing. But hey, thank you for that. But yeah, other people, what are you seeing?
Go ahead, Shelley.
I just had a question about if anybody is seeing any, I know kids used to talk about Nick hits and then also be getting Nick sick.
Mm.
Are you seeing any of that, or people seeing that amongst kids at these nicotine levels? It would just seem like it'd be so easy to kind of overdose on the nicotine itself. Or is there something different about this, that because they're not inhaling it, is it different and that's not happening?
Yeah, I mean, just in my there's just like with cannabis, there's a percentage of people where any amount of THC makes them anxious, and then those people are far less likely to use the product. There are students who report it's like, oh, have you tried Zyn? Yeah, I tried a Zyn, I don't like it, or say, it doesn't make me feel good. And so there's that percentage of students who don't like it right off the bat, and that's like the best protective factor, is not liking any amount. But I think for the people who tolerate that smaller amount, they would definitely if you jump from a 3 to 100, you would get sick, but they're just tearing themselves up slowly. They're moving from the 3 to the 6 to the 10. So and what they're doing often is the Zins, and they're just putting 2 in at a time. They'll put a double in, and then they'll eventually be like, oh, this is getting expensive, I'll buy it online. So I think they're preventing themselves from doing too much generally. But it'd almost be like with alcohol, like they might have too much once and they would blame it on, oh, I drank too much that night, and not swear off alcohol, but just, yeah. But I do think paying attention to not liking it is a great insight. I mean, it's a natural reason for students not to continue it. Yeah.
Another question about the pouches themselves. When it's dissolved, is the pouch dissolved too, or is that trash?
No, that's right. That's trash. And this is what you can look for. The pouch stays there. So the salts dissolve out into your bloodstream, and the pouch is there, maybe just a little flatter. But you'll see them in particularly men's journals and bathrooms, because they're standing there spitting out the empty pouch before they put in a new one, or around athletic fields. Around our Division I fields here at UVM, you look behind the goals in some areas, and they're on the edge of the playing field. And so people put them in for practice and spit them out pre and post. So you can look, just like the old jewel pods, you used to see the pods littered around places. You can look for these pouches at the edges of your high school or middle, different places, but you will see the pouch, to your point. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rolf.
Hi, I'm Josie, and I'm
Hey.
a school nurse in a K through 6 school,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out if you have any ideas of teaching some of this to the 6th graders before we ship them off to middle school. And um, I know they may be kind of young for it, but I also know that before heading into middle school, it might be a good idea at least to have some information for them to have on it. And so if any of you have any ideas for me, that would be great.
Are there other folks with ideas? I mean, I certainly have one, but
Josie, what area are you in?
I'm in Woodbury, so near Hardwick,
Okay,
OSSU.
I'm gonna send you some resources after this via email.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
and I think one thing you can say if you have that opportunity in the classroom, you're comfortable, if you're doing that general education, is to probably acknowledge at some point in middle or high school, they're gonna see these in the bathrooms or on the bus or in places around them. And that there is this option for them to, but that it is a substance that's quickly very habit forming for people, and that and I can say this sincerely, the college students I talk to wish they never started. That's different than there are people with alcohol who who want to stop, and we have a recovery community on campus. There's people with cannabis who want to stop and it's too much. But for the most part, with other drugs, students are interested in finding the balance. I want to keep drinking. I just don't want to do it too much. I don't want to drink too much when I have it. I like smoking weed. I just don't want to smoke too often. Balance they want to find. Nicotine, they're like, fuck, I wish I never started this shit. They know and so that's not a 50-year-old man telling them like, oh, 30 years later, I wish I had stopped. We're talking about 3 years after starting, 2 years after starting, these students wish they never started. And so I think you could sincerely say that, that there are people shortly after beginning this who find themselves needing it now just to do regular things in their lives. And between the cost of it and that habit, wishing they'd never begun. And so that if you can just not just, if your friends are doing that and you want to keep hanging out with them, go ahead, but just don't be joining them because otherwise you might be wishing you had stopped this or never started. Just advice from your future self, and your future self, not like old man, you old woman, but like you in like high school. Go ahead, Ralph. You got something too?
Yeah. About how long does it take the full pouch to dissolve? I mean, I'm sure I could vary, but there must be some window.
Yeah, about 40 minutes, right? Students they should get 30 to 40 minutes out of it. But of course, once they're more used to it, they're only getting a boost in the very beginning, but they'll keep it in for 30 to 40 minutes.
And how many micrograms is that again?
This is a 6er, but they got a 3. They got the 3. So it's kind of like 4 cigarettes equal in the 6. So it's like burning
80, about 80 milligrams.
Each pack is 6. So and then there's 20 in the pack. Yeah. So 60, 120 in this. 120 in this tin.
120 milligrams in the tin.
Yeah.
And 6, so about 20 milligrams per pouch. Did I get that right?
No, maybe there's 20 pouches and there's 6 milligrams each.
20 pouches, 6
Yeah,
milligrams
yeah.
each. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
okay,
there
that's less terrifying.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, because some of those, wow. Yikes.
Yeah.
Some of the newer brand, they're packing in way more than that. So
yeah, I mean, they
Anyway.
can just throw them in. It's so cheap for them to make. Yeah.
anyway, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Shelly, see a hand up there. I don't see everybody too, so please just jump in too if I don't see you on my little small
Another
window
thing
here.
when talking with teenagers, there's always been a big push to talk to them about the industry and how they're marketing to them. And
Yeah.
I think this is a whole new, it's not so new to the teens, but the social media and the influencers and there's even a title called Zinfluencers.
Yes. Yep.
And just making them aware that, because now this doesn't look like big tobacco marketing to them, but it is.
Right.
So like,
Right.
think that's really important talking points. It's always been pretty effective with teens, making them aware about, you know, how they're getting targeted. And this is just another level and another way. And I think maybe the adults in the room haven't kept up with this. It's harder to see what they're seeing because they're being marketed directly. And we're not on the same pages, you know, as like before when we all saw the, you know, the Camel cigarettes, we got that, but there's such a disconnect from what they're seeing when we're seeing, but I know it, you know, it's happening and somehow that has to get into the conversation.
Yeah, and I think your point's right, that it is a good point that's you've got that skeptical teenager brain. And so to tie in the fact that, hey, people are trying to influence you here, and pointing that out, that but they're doing it in that smart way of like getting in people who you've given assigned a value to, they're paying those people to say it instead of slapping their label on it. And it seems to work. And that's picking up this pocket of guys in particular. You got the Joe Rogans and you know, he's like the biggest podcaster out there, but a heavily skewed male audience. And like, it's those type people who they have, just saying that talking point Ralph brought up, many of them probably being paid for it, of like, that it's kind of sophisticated to realize that nicotine just has that bad rep, like you were saying. And it's really just a stimulant. It's not just, cocaine's just a stimulant. I mean, that's how I push it. Yeah, cocaine's a stimulant too, but Coke is Coke. Like like nicotine is quite hard for people. The joking line I have with college students is that with nicotine, it's like it starts off as like the chillest partner you've ever had. Like you just hang out. Everyone, you just at a party, you meet them, maybe you hook up once, and you're like, whatever, that's cool. And you don't see them for a couple of weeks. You don't think about them. A couple of weeks later, you're out together. You hook up again, and you're like, all right. But then, like the third time, suddenly they're texting you all the time. They won't stop. They're like the most jealous partner you ever met. Suddenly, nicotine is not so chill. It is quite hard for your brain to quit. And it becomes like, and they'll laugh, they'll be like, damn. They'll kind of see that it's just calls for that craving all the time. And you don't want to get into that kind of relationship with a partner or a person. And that's what the substance will bring.
In the chat, Lila shares, we have kids who are 12 who are asking for help to stop vaping, and sometimes we are seeing them trying the Zyn to stop.
Yeah, I would just point out that, I mean, people can disagree. If the whole world of current smokers completely stopped and all moved to Zyns, I would see that as a public health benefit. But that's not, and so these are sold in certain moments as quit devices. And there's a few people who may use it at that, but that's just not how most people are using it. There's a small pocket of people, yes. And if, like I said, if every current smoker moved to this and never smoked again, that would be good. But that's not what's happening here. And so what it is, it's mostly an easy on-ramp for people. It's not an off-ramp for most people. And of people who try to do it as an off-ramp, it's now a 2-lane highway and then a 3-lane highway with vaping, smoking, and it's just a bigger road where you can drive faster. It's not a country back road where you're getting off of this yet. And so there's that kind of idea that it's not likely to have, that if sometimes with nicotine, you do need support to do it, you just should do it in the most boring way possible. And that's gum or patches, probably. Like there's nothing cool about a patch, right? And so that's probably why some people won't do it, but there is something still cool about a Zyn. And so using a Zyn to stop vaping is not a great idea for middle and high schooler because they're still performing something socially for each other by doing this. And they're happy, but just put on a patch if you need that support, maybe chew a piece of gum, do it in the most boring way possible if you're trying to use a nicotine replacement product. Don't do it in some cool way that's flavored.
Desiree shares she's heard in schools around her area, parents buying it for them because they're unsure how else to help or what else to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can have sympathy for them. I mean, this is hard and it's hard for people and they're just doing their best. But we can think about that. I'm not seeing everybody. Any other hands up or things people are thinking about? Try to scroll through the names here. Ralph,
Hello?
is that a hand up? Hey, man.
It is. So just two other things. I did throw in to the chat like a website where there are multiple small brands as well as Zyn of pouches available for sale online, just as an example of the many, many different pouch brands that are out there competing. And I only mention it because when we collected all the vapes, we found that there were just tens of brands that weren't on people's consciousness that were actually that we were actually collecting from the 14 different towns. And I've because of direct marketing, direct marketers go on TikTok and go straight to the kids and say, I will sell this to you now. Then they literally, so I'd be surprised if there weren't a lot of these other tiny brands also being used. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
My
The
son,
other thing I just wanted to, the other thing I wanted to throw out is that, so the coming of cysteine is really going to be, what am I trying to say? You can illegally, or you can obtain cysteine right now. You can go on Amazon and buy cysteine. Now, it's in the green lit by the FDA to be approved as a smoking cessation aid and a nicotine quit aid. And I understand that because it's not legal yet, there may be some hesitancy to mention it to people. But on the flip side, vapes aren't approved as cessation aids, and nor is Zyn. So there's this plant-based compound which has been tested for decades in Europe. It's on the verge of being legal. It almost seems unethical not to mention it to parents. Not saying you should do this, but to not mention its existence almost seems, well, I guess it's a debate. You could, but from where I'm coming from, I'm going to mention it to parents. I'm going to mention that it is possible to get cysteine now. It has a safety record in Europe that stretches back decades. It has an efficacy that's so strong that the FDA fast tracked it to get approval. And it's just it just seems like waiting is just, it's borderline unethical, I guess, is where I'm at with it personally. So it just feels like it's naturally part of this conversation when you hear about parents handing their kids vapes or handing their kids Zyn to let them know that there is something coming out there.
Thanks, man. Taysa, you were going to add in something too from
I was just going to share my son is homeschooled and he was listening to part of this conversation and brought up his TikTok. He's 13 and they're marketing up with wellness Zyn, right? They're not nicotine, they're healthy. It's just a way to fit in. I tried to get him to come on camera to share, but he's a little shy right now. But yeah, he's listening and he said it's real. It's all he's seeing right now. Flavors and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right there. Look, I mean, we got a lot of expertise in this state, people on this call. Ralph, we're lucky to have you in the research you're doing. You know, you're doing great work in analyzing the products. Like we saw with, Juul was the product for a while, and then the others really took off. Right now, Zyn is the product, but we will see and are seeing that proliferation. So in that way, it feels just to be like, they're like, so much nicotine for so cheap online. But look, we've had progress with cigarettes. We had progress with vape. We will get, because the message is that in the end, people end up addicted to these, and their friends will tell each other, shit, I wish I wasn't doing that. That's the hardest thing for this company to end up dealing with, is the fact that they are addicting people. And so we can just help try to remind people of that earlier and support them as they're figuring it out. I'll wrap up one more thing too, particularly around the gym. I don't know what, if you do work with people, I think one thing that there is this pro-health messaging almost around it, this wellness thing, going to the gym and these guys, and so it's catching a lot of people going to the gym. The challenge is, even though it might help them feel focused or locked in, motivated for the gym, the thing that people get when they're lifting a lot of weights, particularly not just, kind of the casual exercise you might do for strength and conditioning, but the people who are pumping weights are looking for what's called the pump, or it's the swollen feeling of muscle bulging that happens after a heavy lift. And it's kind of blood circulation bringing nutrients back to the muscles. And so people like that feeling of walking around with that afterwards. Nicotine is a vasoconstrictor. It shrinks up the blood vessels, which is part of the correlation with heart disease and other things that have going on. And so one thing, if you're having a conversation with someone in the gym, is the point that this will decrease that swelling, that pump that you're trying to achieve way more rapidly, which also probably has implications for healing afterwards. And so I think we will see some research showing that this slows down the healing or slows down muscle growth or the healing from injuries. And that will be really relevant to a lot of the athletes. So I think we'll look for that at some point. And then Tasa's pointing out, so there's certainly the nicotine ones, but you can find versions of this in caffeine quite easily too. And
So this is what they're sending for his page.
Yeah.
Recommended for you are energy.
Energy pouches.
Energy pouches for a 13-year-old. And in the energy pouches right next to him are the nicotine pouches. And
yes. And I've yet to see them combined, but you can imagine an easy world where it's THC and nicotine, caffeine and nicotine, just a blend of all of the above, and that our policy has to keep these products separate at the very least.
So it's showing them fruits and bright colors, strawberries, bananas, it's the flavors, but they're making them seem as though they're healthy.
Yes, they love that.
Love that. Thank you for sharing, Aiden. Mm-hmm.
The flavors are such a concept of what they put out there for the flavors is wild. I'll just show if you got one more minute, then we can wrap. I'll just show you one more thing of another quick presentation. I'm sitting in a store again, looking at kind of what's out there for these different products, and I noticed when I'm sitting in this store, this was last year, I was like, oh, I've never seen the click before. It was the click, and it's a magnet on two sides, so you can click together two flavors and make your own flavor combinations. So they got the fruit, they got all these things next to the other vaping devices, which, by the way, see the 4,000 and the 2,000, that's the amount of puffs you can get out of these. If you remember, the original Juul pod was about 150 to 200 puffs. And they came up with that because that was roughly equivalent to the nicotine in a pack of cigarettes. So 200 puffs for them was equal to a pack of cigarettes. And now these things have 4,000 in there. So it's like a tremendous amount of nicotine. But anyway, so you got all these devices.
Evan put into our communications group chat this afternoon that they just released a 50,000 puff disposable vape. 50,000.
What's disposable about that? That's a lifetime. You know what I mean? But anyway, they're called dispos or disposables, these ideas of these ones. And that's its own problem because they have shitty components and you're breathing off the silicone from it on the first couple of rips, and that's unhealthy. But there's plenty of issues. So anyway, I'm sitting in the store, I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, look at those color flavors. Like, it is quite appealing. And then I look over at the candy counter and I'm like, oh, look at those color flavors. Wait a minute, I just saw these colors. And so go back, I focus on the click, and then I focus on the candy, and look at this lineup right here. This is the vape to candy. You got tropical fruit, same color as the tropical fruit. Pink, sour is same color as the sour straws. You got the purple raspberry, same color as the purple raspberry. You got the watermelon, same color as the watermelon. You got pink raspberry lemonade, exact same color as raspberry lemonade. They're literally the same color as the candies. And then they're out there being like, we're not marketing to kids. But it's showing up on your 13-year-old's phone with the same color as a Sour Patch that they're going to get from their Halloween bag tomorrow. It's just a remarkable bit of, they're like, no, we don't advertise to kids. But yet that's, of course, what we see them exactly doing. So anyway, just another little thing of what we're up against at the moment, but bringing that education to students, pointing it out, just helps them see what's being sold to them. And so if anybody wants any of these slides, I'm happy to send them to Taysa. You can share them out. Just adopt them for your own use. I don't worry. Do whatever you want with them. Use them however you want. Just some information for you.
Natalie, did you have something? I saw you.
No, well, thank you, Tom, so much. I was fortunate to have a virtual session about sort of like tips and trips for post-grad life with 11th and 12th graders. And we did a couple mentees with them, which if you all don't use that platform, it's really helpful for gauging anonymous responses within a presentation. And so we asked specifically what the nicotine culture is at their school, what sort of is the vibe, what's going around. And it was interesting because on the one hand, we were hearing there feels like there's a decline in vaping, that like vaping is becoming significantly less like a thing, which for some kids is a loss of connection because they're used to doing it all together. And what has happened with Zyn is that it's individualized the use again, that it's created a loss of connection because a lot of time the kids were vaping together, right, in the bathroom. And so Zyn has actually created a loss of connection with use and has created an individual sort of, which was really interesting for them to say, to like point out.
A great insight, and I think has implications because part of it is to the expression is, yo, let me see that. Like when somebody has a vape, you're like, let me see that. Let me get a rip of that. And so like, it's that idea of sharing, but you're not you might open up your tin and let somebody take one, but it's like, but you're not sharing it. So that's a great insight. And I think yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hey, all, thanks for your time. And like I said, I'll share these slides. If there's anything else people are thinking about, I'm happy to be around here for a minute, but thank you, everyone. And thanks for the chance to be here. And Ralph, thanks so much, man. And keep doing that research. Keep letting us know what you're seeing and doing. Really important.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tom. I'd love to talk to you later sometime.
Yeah, let's connect, man. Get me on email. It'd be great to have keep the conversation going. I know you're doing some good work with Jared and some people out there.